Messiah didn't come on Monday as predicted, they would say, well, he's coming on Thursday. And there would be these rumors that would sweep through her camp that the Messiah was coming or had arrived. And of course, nobody ever saw the Messiah. And she concluded her talk by saying, I guess the Messiah did come because I survived, but I never met him. So I think that part of what happened, aside from the movement towards rationality and away from what was regarded as mysticism, superstition, was that the focus was so much on the collective dream. And how do you integrate the collective dream? So until Jung and Adler and Freud made dreaming important again, there was this attitude among certainly 19th century Jews that dreaming was for mystics, women, children, not serious work, especially not for men. And there was very little interest, actually, until Freud picked up the theme. And there's been a lot of speculation as to how much Freud took from Jewish sources and how much he did study the mystical texts and so on. But Freud became preoccupied with the notion that all the dreams were really about our unexpressed emotions, and particularly the repressed sexuality. And so he tended to see dreams primarily in their psychological context for the individual. Whereas Jung and Adler to some extent saw the dreams as expressions of the collective unconscious. And very much as Campbell and other mythologists have taught us, that we carry in our psyche the symbols of the entire world, of all the cultures. And that in the dream world, we are dipping in to a layer of consciousness that we may or may not be able to get to in our waking state because we're too busy, or we're too preoccupied, or we've been trained otherwise. So Jung really gave us that shift that in a way took us back to the ancient thinking, but with a modern psychological twist. And now if you go into Borders or Barnes & Noble, there are just piles and piles of dream books. And they are mostly self-help books, and a great many of them are dictionaries and stuff for you to interpret the symbols. And a lot of them, I would say, are useful up to a point, and then you have a couple of people who really have laid the groundwork for a really contemporary philosophy and theory of dreams. And I didn't bring a pile of books tonight. I didn't get to even bring flowers tonight, but I do also have bibliographies for those who are interested. There are a lot of wonderful contemporary dream philosophers, I would say, who are not just practitioners, but who really have gone into much greater depth. So I want to pause here and not only give out some material, but now I want to go around, and I'd like to get more of people's connection to this, or lack of connection. And also for you, Donna, particularly, many children that I encounter are lucid dreamers. They can go back into the same dream if they wish to. They can go into the dream and fight the monster. And my experience has been that they're really good at it around 4 or 5 years old. And as soon as they start going to school, they start to lose some of that ability. Anyway, as the mother of two boys.
As the mother of two boys, one who's turning 5 in a couple weeks, one thing I've always said to them when they go to sleep, when I'm lying with them, I mean, not so much the 12, because he's a little older, but I do a little thing: relax, breathe, let it all go, surrender the day to the night, and go to dream world where you're always safe and you can do whatever you want.
Nice.
Because I'm hoping that it's true.
And meanwhile, he's battling the galactic monsters.
Right, but I figured I want to put that at least as an idea, because we don't know it's not true. I haven't had it disproved.
Right.
And so that's part of what I've done. But I haven't heard either of them tell me any dreams here and there. Every now and then, the little one says he has a bad dream, but I just remind them you're always safe. And yeah, because you do have control. I think I guess that's what lucid dreaming, that there is that ability ultimately.
So I don't know if you
catch it.
remember, there was a book called The Kin of Atta Are Waiting for You. And it was about a group of people called the Sinoi, where everyone is focused on dreams. Later they said somebody made it up and it wasn't really anthropological. But the whole idea is of asking in the morning about the dreams, particularly with children. Thank you.
Not just with children, actually, because in the morning I can remember my dreams very well and think, gee, this is one I really want to remember. And then
Gone.
gone. If I
Right.
come home in the afternoon, I just can't even begin to think about it. But generally, the ones I try to get back to usually involve groups of people. And I'm never sure why or how this group is together or why it's together. And people seem to pop in and out. And usually I remember something they've said. And I always thought, well, this is my way of asking, what would you have thought about something? Because I pretty much think they were all people I knew very well, and I'm not surprised usually at the answer.
So sometimes you get advice or information.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't even maybe seem key at the moment, but then I'll think about it,
Right.
even while I'm still dreaming, and think it
So
means
before we
something
leave
else.
tonight, I'm going to give you a list. It has 10 things that I call creating the optimal conditions for remembering your dreams. And one of them is not to move around quickly when you wake up. Most people have to get up, go to the bathroom, but maybe go back or sit and meditate. And the other is as soon as possible after you get up to record the dream. The third is if you're a meditator to meditate early, but ask before your meditation to retain the dream. The other is to keep the recording stuff right near your bed. And if you are an artist, Sophania couldn't come tonight, but people like that, to draw it very quickly and to share it, call someone on the phone or join a dream group.
Well, actually, one dream that I've had for years, which is recurrent, I was told is about the most common dream there is. It's usually that I'm going back to school, or I'm in school, and either I don't remember where I'm supposed to be.
Right, where you don't have the right pen.
And I don't have my classes written down. I
Right.
don't know what room I'm supposed to be in.
Right.
And it's a very stressful dream, but I was told that's one of
It's
the
very
most
common. Those are anxiety. They're considered anxiety dreams, but it's kind of like before you take a trip, if you're having dreams that you miss the train or you don't have your plane schedule. They are very common. So Freud's idea was that we work out in the dream what we can't work on during the day. I think it was Gurdjieff who said that when we're enlightened, we wouldn't need to dream. And then there's a Jewish view that we are all God's dream. We're the dreamers in God's dream. We just haven't woken up. Thank you. Oh, say your name also.
Oh, I'm Marjorie. I'm Donna's mother. Grandmother.
And grandmother of the
two.
famous boys. Right.
I'm Susan, and I'm one of those people that I don't remember that many dreams. I just know that when I do, I usually think, wow, that's intense. I usually wake up on fear or you just really vivid. It's like a lot of action and then I got. That's bizarre, kind of like it doesn't make sense. But generally, like right now, if you ask me, what dream do you remember, and it's like, I don't know. I don't remember a lot of them. I just know that I do when I first wake up.
Right, and one approach is to do an intentionality before you go to sleep, to say that you are going to dream, that you are going to remember. So play with that for a bit.
Okay.
My name is Anne, and I used to have vivid dreams when I was younger and adventures, and it was fascinating and all kinds of weird stuff. Sort of strange space and interesting things, but I don't seem to have that anymore, at least I'm not remembering them. And I find that I'm terrible at interpreting my own dreams. I just find dreams kind of inscrutable. And the only way I can get to the depth of what a dream means, if it seems like a dream that has some kind of message, is for me to write about it. And in the writing, I find connections and I discover the meaning.
The Jungians recommend that you give every dream a title, and I do that every morning. I give my dreams a title. And they also say that even if you remember one word, write it down, and that later the interpretation of that word will come. The other one that I have found fun is that sometimes something will appear on a theater marquee in a dream for me, and it'll be just one line. But I write it or I draw it because it's always a very significant line. So it's paying attention to small details. And you're an artist. I mean, you can take something from the dream and, paint it, draw it, and I'm sure you see a lot in it.
Well, I find through poetry,
Mm-hmm.
I find the meaning more than anything.
Mm. Your whole life is a dream.
Row, row, row your boat. I'm a great believer in conscious sleep and yogic dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe basically that we're living in a dream from which we have to awaken, much as a fish might come out of water and take a first breath. I love to dream. So I'm obviously not awakened.
Well, you're getting close. David is able to sleep anywhere, anytime, for like these little short naps.
I'm a professional napper.
Yeah. And so one of the questions I want to ask you is, like when you're in Japan or Korea or China or Australia, are your dreams any different than they are at home?
The answer is I don't know, but I was wondering if people with multiple personalities have different sets of dreams.
That's a
That
good
would be an
question.
interesting research paper.
That's a really good question.
So whoever the personality is
Yeah.
that's in Japan,
Yeah.
probably has different dreams, yes.
Right. Also, like I've been working now on transporting myself to particular places in the world. It has a name, teletransportation or something like that. But I've been focusing on a particular place in the world and agreed with another group of meditators to do this. And it's been really interesting to me that it hasn't taken that long to get a little better at it.
Astral projection, is that it?
I guess, I wouldn't give it quite such a fancy term, But there are people that I know certainly show up, in other places. But this is more of a meditative or dream state thing of going to a particular place.
And also, I think there's a real difference between that you can have a vision that is really distinctly different from a dream.
I agree.
You really literally enter into the
Yeah.
Akashic records or whatever you want to call it and have like a staggering experience, which I've had.
Yeah.
Absolutely mind-blowing, but I knew at the time that it was a vision, and I knew that it was true, and I knew that it was real. And that was really exciting.
I agree with you. I think the early Talmudic idea of dreams, visions, prophecy, kind of blending one into the other, I think they're very distinct. I think that they did have it right, possibly, that the prophets have a particular relationship to what we call the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. And yes, they cultivate it through prayer and fasting and meditation and chanting and isolation. But there's some connection that they have to go in to that relationship with the divine that's very that's very developed and maybe unique to begin with and then highly, highly developed. And I think there is a difference between vision and prophecy and what most of us have as the dream state. But I think even what we have as the dream state, we could develop more and get more from it. We're up to you, Mustafa.
Okay, my name is Mustafa. I'm from Sudan. Three of us are from Khartoum, Sudan.
Mm.
First of all, I'm very thankful to this opportunity to be here and listen to this. And grateful that you are accepting us as part of this session. And I found what you said is so much interesting and attractive. And I was absorbed in every word you said. And I was surprised how much we are very similar.
The same.
It's the same idea.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
also, when I was coming here, I was expecting religious talk, but then what you are saying is so, as if it's specialization, so much academic as well.
Uh-huh.
And,
I think I make a little bit of a distinction between spiritual and religious. I consider myself spiritual. I consider Judaism like the spiritual path that I came into, you know, in my family and that I've been trained in. And I think that we've gotten caught up with the idea of religion as particular authority, right? And the mystics, whether, I just taught a class on Jewish mysticism recently, and I said, well, I meditate, and I learned to meditate from Quakers and Buddhists, but I'm not a Buddhist. And I do Hindu chanting, but I'm not a Hindu. And I have students who study Kabbalah, but they're not Jewish. And if I could get into one of those places in Turkey and learn how to whirl, I'd like to do that. But I wouldn't, if I became a dervish, I still wouldn't be a Muslim. So part of what I think is happening in the 21st century is we're sharing the mystical information, and we're still, to some extent, looking to teachers who have some authenticity in their own tradition. If I want to learn how to whirl, I'm going to go to a Sufi teacher, right? It's kind of like we want the kernel without all the external skin, right? We'd like to go more into part of it. And that's where I think all mystics basically do share, that what you're trying to do is get to the one, and that all the means you use to get there are just techniques or whatever you want to call them.
well, thank you also for saying that. That's the same. Also, that's the same thinking I belong to. And thanks to Joanna for inviting us here. And it was the same speech we were saying 2 days ago, that I think the future is for a kind of religion that's beyond the apparent religions. The apparent religions seem to be cultural and environmental expressions of spiritual needs, but somehow there is a layer behind that we all share. And I think that's why it looks like the same ideas you just said, we share them. We also belong to a group who is very much spiritual, and we put a lot of weight into dreams. And even just coming from home, Najat, my wife, was telling a dream that she saw, and she's so pure in dreams. I see dreams, but usually I underestimate my dreams because when I compare them to the dreams
She's the ace dreamer.
and in my dreams, usually I find myself living the dream, and then till I awake, I take some time to realize that's a dream. And then I get happy with the content of that dream, usually. Relying on what it means spiritually. Because also of the intensive spiritual approach that we practice. I don't want to.
But we need that happiness. I mean, if we think about what's going on in the world, so much of what's going on in the world is like a terrible dream. I mean, thousands of people died in Myanmar today, you know, and yes, we'll send help, send money, and so on, but there's also, what do we do while the world is involved in the bad dream? How do we keep the balance, send the positive energy, along with the money and the food and the water? But is there something about how we retain the vision that also helps to keep the world balanced? That's the approach in the Zohar in Kabbalah, is that the human being in and of themselves helps to keep the tree of life in balance. That the person through their own actions, their own prayers, helps to keep the balance in the universe. And that's also very connected to religious science, New Thought, Holmes, and so on, of what's the role of the individual and what's the role that you play with your own visioning and your own dreaming. I was at a very large service a couple of years ago in Berkeley during the major Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, and there was some horrible thing going on in Israel, and somebody came up to me and said, like, you know, how do you, because I wasn't prepared to get into the kind of negative thing that was going on. And they said, how do you do this? And I said, well, I have a constant dream, a constant vision, where I'm walking in the square in Jerusalem with my grandchildren, and everyone's there together, you know, Jews and Christians and Muslims. I said, I keep having the same dream, the same vision, and I have it over and over again. And I said, I think that no matter what happens, that inner vision helps to keep me somewhat more balanced, so I don't flip out every time there's some awful thing. I still have to maybe do something about it, but it's also we'll get to you when you talk, Joanna, because that's an important issue for you, of how you hold the energy. Yeah. And Ibrahim, where are you between these two wonderful parents?
Yeah. Well, I have often been interested in Jewish history, actually, always, and I have done a lot of readings in Jewish history. But all my readings have been academic so far. And so I've always wanted to get an understanding of this, like this ritual aspect of Judaism. And I tend to distrust my ability in understanding spiritual things. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Nachar.
Yeah, my name is Najat. As he told you, we are from Sudan. And I want to thank you for this opportunity and to give us a chance to come and to attend this lesson. And as he told you, I see many dreams almost every night. And sometimes they are very strange. Sometimes if I saw something at night, it happens as it is.
This is premonitory.
Yeah. Like, for example, last night, I told Mustafa, before, I don't think I was asleep before for myself. I kept saying, I love you, God, I love you, God. And after a while, I heard the voice, he said to me, okay, since you love your God, we will take you to see your God. And after one moment, I saw myself going up to the sky. And when I looked down, I found my body. And I said to him, I don't want to die. Can I return back to my body? He said, no, you will see your God and you will come back again. And I went up to the sky, I see the clouds and lights, beautiful places there. And I came back again to my body.
So,
Very strange.
well, a lot of people report that they do have dreams also where they fly. I don't know whether you felt yourself flying or just going up.
Not flying, I'm just going.
Being-
Sometimes I see myself.
You do fly, yeah, yeah. Those are fun dreams. So what you're seeing is what the books are writing about. You don't have to read the books, you're doing it. So do you ever get information that you can then use in the family or in the world? You know, you get information ahead of time?
Yeah, sometimes I see my mother telling me something will
Mhm.
happen, and it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And like what was that?
Yeah.
تتذكري؟
You know, sometimes the events happen
Yeah.
the way she sees them.
Yeah. Part of what I notice is sometimes we see something, but in the dream we're not sure where it is or exactly when it is. And so we don't know what we can do with it, you know. And other times it's pretty clear that we could use it. Yeah. But I'm sure your life is guided.
Like one day while we were in Khartoum, and that day right from the morning, since the morning she was telling me, well, pray, I'm so afraid that something worse is coming,
Mm-hmm.
might happen today. And she's like so sick, and it happens that day in the evening at the sunset, an accident happened, that a plane coming from a town in Sudan to Khartoum, and it was a little after the sunset, and there is no electricity at the airport, and there is a problem for the plane to come down, and it was half rainy, and the plane was, and we were living near the airport by then, and the plane was all the time, for a long time, moving in the sky, and there is no way for it to come
To
down.
descend.
Till finally it just fell as it is, after obviously there is no fuel. It just came down as it is, and everybody in it died, and that was what was holding her.
Right, so you were feeling it, but you don't have like the number of the plane or what time it's going to happen to be able to utilize it, yeah. But you can utilize it by sending your own thoughts, but it's really hard to make it specific.
Yeah, but one day I saw my uncle. I asked him, "You are dead?" He said, "Yes." I asked him, "Why did you come to visit me?" He said, "I want to tell you that I'm going to take your brother with me in July, in 4th of July." And it happened.
It happened, yeah.
My brother died in that day. He was okay, just heart attack.
So it feels to me, if we were a dream group where people share dreams, I used to be in a dream group in Berkeley. So part of the technique we use in the dream group is I say to you, Najab, if that was my dream, I feel as if I were you, that I would know that God really speaks to me and watches over me. I would feel like my faith is very much affirmed through the dreams. Now, this may or may not be how you feel, but that's how we would respond in a dream group. Or I would say to somebody, if that was my dream, you know, I would feel like, oh, I'm so glad to see my uncle, or something like that. It may not be the exact same thing you feel, but whenever I would give over any kind of shared interpretation, I would be clear that if that was my dream, that may be how I feel, not necessarily how you feel. But yeah, so that's kind of the process when they're sharing in dream groups, is to be respectful of the other person's dream, but also to give a little bit of an insight into how somebody else might experience it. Yeah, Joanna.
Oh boy, this is wonderful. It just reminds me of how deeply I was involved with dreams and dream groups a while ago. And while I guess my next religion after Judaism was psychology. And so I studied a lot about dreams and psychology, and I would keep lots and lots of journals. And what was happening for me is that I was spending more time with my dreams than I was in the real time. And I finally had to kind of rebalance myself because I would spend hours in the morning just with the dream and looking at every word and interpreting and then trying to go back in, like you said, to the meditative state and using the information and going further into it. And so it became, I loved it. I liked being there a whole lot more. So I had to come back to balance. And I still do it occasionally, but you're right, because when I was doing that, it was like every morning I was getting clear symbolic dreams. And now that I don't pay attention to it, it's rarely that I do. Like I'll intend after maybe when I was with Amma the last time, and I came back and I made sure that I spent time, with the dream and to write down the next morning what was happening. And so, I really have come to believe so much of what we now know that I think I'm functioning on many planes all at the same time. So while this is an awake state, I'm also in other dimensions. And it's just putting my attention on one dimension or another. And that this is the most, vivid in the sense that it's the most tangible, but it's not the only one. So I kind of feel similarly in that way. The couple of things that you said, Rabbi, about positive dreams and negative dreams, the teaching that I learned was that there are only positive dreams. And that the ones that appear as negative, that they are learning dreams, just as you said. These are dreams that come to teach. And so I think that period of time that I was so intensely involved in dreams, I needed to learn that way. And it was self-help, it was self-growth, and it was learning about myself in relationship to others and to the world. And I learned it through that interpretation and through working together with other people and to really dissecting the psychology of whatever needed to be healed. And they were very, very deeply psychically healing dreams. And so that was very powerful and very, very beneficial. Now, you were asking me about how to hold the energy in that negativity?
Right, because in our conversation last night, you were saying how part of your own approach is not to take in all of the negativity that's being promoted now about the economy, right? And how does one do that? We know people are losing their houses and can't pay their bills. A lot of us can't pay our bills, but there's real horror stories out there now of people losing their homes and their businesses and going into bankruptcy and so on, and it does get worse every day. So is this like a collective media thing, or, you're saying you want to hold that energy to not enter that state?
Well, I think it comes back to choice. And for me, it's not a matter of denying that these things are happening, or that anything happens, or the Holocaust happened, or, I know that the information I need to know comes to me, and I know that it exists, but then I immediately make a choice as to where I want to put my mind and where I want to put my attention and how I want to hold this information. Because if I put energy, I feel like whatever I put energy on increases. So if I put energy on all of the media negative stories about the economy, which is what many people are doing, of course it's going to increase. So the teachings that say, what we think is what we create, then this is what's being created. Well, I know at the same time, and I have probably at least one-for-one examples of people who are prospering right now. And always have in down times. And again, that is not to negate or to be compassionate for situations that in that moment appear, the conditions appear
to be negative or, and certainly could be very devastating and traumatic. And I honor that, but I don't attach to it. And I turn my energy towards a vision of what I would like to see, whether that's to see all cultures as one, to see what is behind the oneness of everything. And so I have just it's a training of training my mind, because I used to be depressed all the time because I was identifying with poverty, with death, with Holocaust, with genocide, with the negativity, and I was walking around in the world very depressed. And so that wasn't helping anybody or anything. So I learned how to get myself out of that kind of feelings, and then to share that, to share that with others, to bring joy into the world. And
Thank
that's how I do it.
Bringing it back to the dreams, part of what I tell people in the dream workshops is that if you want to have interesting dreams, it's better not to watch late night television and to listen to the news. And a lot of people, the other day, a friend of mine said he likes watching Jay Leno. It relaxes him, There's a lot of comedians on late at night, and that is kind of good for people. But essentially, the whole focus is if you want to improve your dream life and the quality of what comes in, you would play nice music or meditate or make love, that you wouldn't enter the sleep state from watching a violent film or television news. And yet probably much of this country is watching late night TV as a way of decompressing from their own lives, So it's another form of fantasy, but I don't know what it
But
does.
that's how it gets into
Yeah,
the
it
collective
gets into
consciousness.
the collective consciousness, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about, you had said, and it's true, that we each have individual relationships with our dreams.
Yes.
But that the dictionaries and the symbols I have found helpful to give me
Somewhat.
some ideas
Yeah.
and to sort of a jumping off point.
Yeah, I think they're useful in the sense of almost all the dictionaries will agree, you dream about water, it's probably about the unconscious.
Yeah.
You dream about death, it's about transformation, right? But there's also a lot of stuff in the dream dictionaries that's really, from nowhere.
Yeah.
So I would say if you have a favorite dream philosopher and that person has a dictionary, maybe that's worth looking at. But I would say to keep your own dictionary, and that means you'd have to index your dream.